everyone. My name is Amy, and on behalf of the Academic Writing Education Center, I welcome you to Reading to Connect. In our Week 13 course, we're going to be talking about affordable and sustainable energy. Let's start. What we need to know about this topic first and foremost is that there is a fixed number of resources that are currently available on Earth. How to distribute these resources has always been an issue of hot discussions. So in today's lesson, we're going to be exploring and analyzing different articles and be able to understand more about the concept of affordable and sustainable energy. Next, we're going to understand and practice different reading strategies. Then we're going to predict and preview the content of a text. Next, we're going to infer information that is implicit in the text. Then we're going to relate broad themes to specific situations. At last, we're going to try to synthesize these different information together and relate. So, we have always heard about being sustainable or going green. But exactly what do these concepts mean? What kind of energy are actually green energy or sustainable energy? Now, think to yourself, what do they mean to you? Jot them down on a piece of paper and we'll discuss. So before our discussion, let's talk a little bit more about what our concept of sustainability is. A lot of time we're talking about the reuse of different resources. The word sustainability is often related to the word being environmentally friendly. We could also be talking about something that could be preserved or maintained for a long period of time. And at last, an item or concept that's ecologically balanced. So for example, a lot of garments that we're currently purchasing at the moment, you will see a lot of brand name actually advocating for the item to be either organic, environmentally friendly, or made from reusable materials. Now, according to Oxford Dictionary, sustainability means that it can be maintained at a certain level for a period of time. Basically, it means that without depleting our currently available natural resources, we're aiming to keep the balance within our ecological environment. In other words, when we talk about sustainability, it means that this particular source can be replenished so that our future generation can use it as well. Now, going back to our little exercise before, can you name something that is actually sustainable, whether it's an energy, a material, concept, etc.? Let's go with energy, shall we? Take a minute, jot down all of the energy resources that you can think of that are sustainable. Let's go. So some of the common reusable energy or sustainable energy you could possibly think of are probably sunlight, so solar panels, wind, so wind farms, water, such as hydropower, or biofuels, such as fuel extracted from corn. Now we're going to go into the opposite direction. What are some of the energy that are unsustainable? When we talk about unsustainable energy, we'll be looking at fossil fuels. We're probably looking at unsustainable fish farming, such as the use of drift nets. We might be talking about the use of plastics if they're unrecyclable. Or we're talking about the usage of rocks or mineral because it takes a million years of them to form. Once we use them, we cannot use them again. So in general, when we talk about unsustainable, it seems like all of the methods mentioned above could be doing harm to the environment. Keeping that in mind, we're going to go into our first reading. Now let's look at the word cloud. What word collocations can you identify from this word cloud? Again, jot them down on a piece of paper and we're going to come back and discuss. Based on the word cloud and the collocation you've just identified, what can you anticipate reading one to be? Let's look at the keyword. On the left-hand side in blue are the keywords on the topic we're about to discuss, including carbon dioxide emission, energy production, and developing countries. On the right-hand side in yellow, the words like reused material, positive connotations, and circular economies. So we know that these are the keywords that we're hoping to discuss in this particular text. Now, what is interesting is the word positive connotation. What does that have to do with sustainability? We will be finding out about that in our reading. So, the topic of our reading is waste. Spend 3 minutes, read through this text on waste does not exist, there's only post-trash. After you read, we're going to come back and discuss. Happy reading! Waste does not exist, there's only post-trash. Waste is generally regarded as any materials discarded because it is a byproduct or a product that is no longer of use. It is associated with a lack of value as captured in alternative terms such as garbage, junk, rubbish, or trash. But we increasingly understand that this negative view has become inappropriate and that a more positive approach is necessary to achieve sustainability. Waste is a particular problem for developing countries. This is not because they produce more. While only accounting for 16% of the world's population, high-income countries generate about 34% of the world's waste. However, in the fastest-growing region of sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and the Middle East and North Africa, total waste generation is expected to nearly triple, double, and double, respectively, by 2050. In principle, every material can be reused, so that what has been discarded is actually material awaiting further use. All matter is made from the same elements in different combinations and capable of being transformed into other substances by chemical or biological processes. In a world of finite resources, with enormous quantities of discarded matter damaging Earth's environment and biodiversity, it is imperative that this further use is maximized. We need to stop thinking of any material as being waste, and the very concept of waste matter should disappear. Carbon dioxide emissions from the burning of woods and fossil fuels and concrete production have generated a significant increase in global temperature over the last century. And energy production from burning waste has added to those in recent years. Attention globally is now being given to capturing this carbon dioxide and either storing it long-term, e.g., buried in abandoned mines or under the seabed, or converting it into products like refrigerant, carbonated drinks, fuels, and fertilizers. Efforts is being directed to developing artificial photosynthesis with the sun's energy harnessed to convert water and carbon dioxide into carbohydrates and oxygen, imitating the natural process in plants. Developing countries face a triple challenge in handling waste. Low and middle income countries often have poorly developed waste management systems, so refuse is discarded in an uncontrolled manner or its disposal is not environmentally safe. India's award-winning Trashnomic education program is one of many initiatives aiming to reduce production and uncontrolled discarding of garbage through behavior change. Some low and middle income countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America have become destinations for waste and scrap products produced in high-income countries. Richer countries may find it cheaper to export waste than manage it at home under strict regulations, but disposal in other countries can be more environmentally damaging. Some low and middle income countries seek to recover valuable constituents from imported waste, but may not adopt or enforce adequate standards of environmental protection. The 3R initiative, reduce, reuse, and recycle, strive to make effective use of cycling of resources and materials. Agreed by the 2004 G8 summit, it has been adopted by many countries, notably in Asia, and become a core feature of the so-called circular economy. This approach aims to break the global take, make, consume, and dispose pattern of growth. While increasing attention to these approaches is extremely welcomed, we need a fundamental shift in global thinking if they are to have maximum impact. Language itself conditions attitude, and the word waste need to be replaced by a term with more positive connotations that encourage constructive thinking about what is currently discarded. Now that we've read the text, let's organize the main idea of this text. The first main idea in paragraph 1 is that there's an increased attention to waste. And this attention has shifted from a negative view to a more sustainable material. And the detail that supports this main idea is that waste is a byproduct that lacks a value, and the idea that waste is negative actually is deemed inappropriate, and that a more positive approach is to be taken with sustainability. Going back to what we just talked about of positive connotation, this shift of attitude is what positive connotation is talking about. In the second paragraph, it talks about how waste is a particular problem for developing countries. The supporting detail that supports this main idea talks about how waste generation in these different areas are actually on the rise. In the third paragraph, it discusses how every material is reusable. And the supporting detail for this particular main idea talks about how same elements in different combination in an item is actually all the same. And hence, everything can be reused. In the fourth paragraph, it says that global attention is given up to transform carbon dioxide emission. And the supporting detail that goes with this main idea talks about different methods of transformation. In the fifth paragraph, it talked about developing countries facing challenges in handling waste. And the supporting detail is that developing countries have poorly developed waste management systems. In paragraph 6, it talks about how low and middle income countries has become destination where the developed country dump their waste. The supporting detail for that is that it is cheaper for these richer countries to export waste rather than managing these things at home. Now, in paragraph 7, it simply stated that some low and middle income countries would seek to recover valuable constituent from these imported waste that they receive from richer countries. In paragraph 8, it talks about the 3R initiative: reduce, reuse, and recycle, and how this was agreed in the 2004 GA summit, and the concept of circular economy was also used to support this main idea. In paragraph 9, which is a concluding paragraph, discussed the fundamental shift that is needed in global thinking. In conclusion, there's a need for the word waste to be transformed into a term with more positive connotations. So the overall purpose and the tone of this text is actually to persuade. Basically, the author is trying to argue that waste is a reusable material, and that the word waste needs a more positive term to replace it. Furthermore, there's a need for adequate support in terms of environmental protection. Overall, with this persuasive text, we can see that there's more use of first and third person perspective. The language is semi-formal. Many of the texts are factual and informative to ensure that they're delivering the correct information to you. Now, we need to think critically. In the text, it argues that the word waste needs to be replaced with a more positive connotation word. But, ask the reader, do you agree with that? Do you think that by replacing the word waste with a more positive connotation word, it can actually change the way people think about waste or the overall people's attitude towards the concept of sustainability on waste management? Now let's dig deeper. The text also mentioned that richer countries will import their waste into poorer countries. Do you think that's fair? With that in mind, let's go into reading 2. We're going to watch a short clip about food security. Let's go. Now that we've seen the video, how is food security defined in this video? What is the purpose of relating food security to the Chinese word population? And in the video, food security is as a result of unequal distribution or insufficient production. In our following discussion, we'll be discussing 3 aspects. Number 1, food security, essentially the quantity of food and whether or not it is sufficient. Next is food safety, whether or not it is safe to consume. And at last, sustainability. Now, let's get reading. Spend a couple minutes, read through the article, and we're going to come back and talk about it. Let's go. Food security, safety, and sustainability. Getting the trade-offs right. Sustainable food security, a political imperative and challenge. Sustainable food security will require A. Availability of foods or sufficient food production. B. Access to food and ability to purchase food. C. Sufficiency in terms of nutrient, including energy, protein, and micronutrients as well as safety, and D, the stability and foreseeability of these conditions. Threats to food security includes limited supplies of nutrients and safe foods or when the consumer's food purchasing power is limited. Food insecurity affects low-income groups most with increased risk of hunger and malnutrition. The International Monetary Fund found in low-income countries a correlation between rising food prices and social unrest. Social unrest and wars result in consequent food insecurities and famines. However, the question whether initial food insecurities are a driver for and triggers unrest is complicated. It is raising food prices together with failing political institutions, social safety nets, demographic pressures, and presence of other grievances that is associated with social unrest. The Arab Spring 2011 is one example where spiked food prices was one of the drivers for social unrest. Hence, food insecurity is a serious threat to public health, social sustainability, and political stability. This challenge is magnified as the world's population is foreseen to increase to nearly 10 billion in 2050. This 10 billion people will eat a diet richer in animal protein. The main reason is that 3 billion people will shift towards a diet richer in meat, fish, poultry, and dairy foods. Hence, feeding 10 billion people in a sustainable way will probably require disruptive change of the food supply chain during the next 20 years. Moreover, the reduction of food losses and food waste is part of the solution. Another challenge is the diversion of edible crops, e.g., corn, sugarcane, to biofuel production. These diverted crops to biofuel could have provided food for 400 million people. Moreover, these diversions make the prices of biofuel crops more correlated to oil prices than to supply and demand of food. Another concern is the increasing speculation in food prices as hedge funds become greater players in the market for food commodities as wheat, oilseeds, and corn. Increasing the variability of food prices poses a risk to food security for low-income groups. A rapid urbanization has resulted in that more than half of the global population is living in cities, which is another challenge to food security. As urban consumers are dependent on being able to purchase food, the food security of low-income urban populations are susceptible to increase in food prices or unpredictable variation of food prices, in particular of staple foods in countries with incomplete socio-economic safety nets. Moreover, relying on imports may not be the solution as some countries impose import restriction of foods in time of limited food supplies. Hence, solution to long-term food security becomes national aims that might explain the drives for developing novel sources of food and animal feedstuffs and resilient food chains. Several reports have addressed these challenges. The EAT Lancet Commission on Healthy Diet from Sustainable Food Productions suggests several dietary changes to enable feeding a world with 10 billion people in a resilient way. In brief, the recommendation was to double the consumption of fruits, vegetables, nuts, and legumes, and to halve the consumption of red meats and sugar. A diet rich in plant-based food and with fewer animal-sourced food confers both health and environmental benefits. Another example is the 80 Canary report on the disruption from novel meat alternatives on the global food production systems. The report suggested that meat will be replaced by vegan or vegetarian meat replacements, insect-based meat replacements, and/or cultured meat, i.e., meat produced in bioreactors. Animal proteins such as milk, egg, and products therefore will be easier to replace as their structures and biochemistry are simpler. The report suggests that in the future, animal protein and energy, i.e., meat, milk, and eggs, should be produced using feed sources not suitable for human consumption, e.g., pastures, grass, hay, or byproducts. Food safety and food securities are by necessity complementing aims for achieving freedom from hunger. One tenet is that unsafe food do not solve food security problems. However, measures to ensure safety and quality of food can sometimes reduce the amount of food available and thereby amplify food scarcity. For example, consumers interpret best before dates as food being poisonous thereafter dates, thus increasing food waste and threatening food security. Massive and not targeted food recalls are other examples of food waste due to safety concern. Environmental sustainability is a part to varying degree of all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. One key message, though, is that environmental sustainability is a part of social and economic sustainability as well as food security and safety. The pursuit of one goal could be to the detriment of other goals. Hence, we need to balance these goals and manage the trade-offs. Now that we're done reading, let's conclude what are the main ideas and the supporting details that are given in the text. From paragraph 1 to 4, it talked about the serious threat to food security. In terms of detail, it talked about how food security is a serious threat to public health, social sustainability, and political stability. Furthermore, it talked about the increase on the variability of food prices and how it poses risks to food security for low-income groups. Moreover, it also talked about the effect of rapid urbanization. Now, from paragraph 5 to 7, it talks about the solution and how they can cope with food security challenges. In terms of the supporting detail, they gave some dietary changes and suggestions. For example, how these dietary changes are needed to enable feeding a world with 10 billion people in a resilient way. Nonetheless, the supporting detail also posed the question of food safety versus food security. In conclusion, this text talked about how to balance the goal of sustainability, food security, and food safety. Now we're going to practice our critical thinking skills. I'm going to show you a couple statements, and you're going to tell me the attitude of the author. Is it positive, is it negative, or is it neutral? So essentially, you're looking at the clues that are presented in the second reading, and you're going to tell me how does the author feel about it. Number 1, there's a correlation between rising food prices and social unrest. Is it positive, negative, or neutral? It is neutral, because through word choices, we are able to understand whether or not the author agrees with a particular thing. Sometimes the author will not express it explicitly. We may need to do some inferring in order to understand it. For example, in paragraph 2, so how we can identify author's meaning is through identifying with the credible sources that are cited in the text. It could be making logical inferences or through their word choices. Let's look at the second paragraph, an example. We can see that the author has cited a lot of information. These information are not personal, they are not opinions, they are facts, and there are proper citations from academic sources. In this particular statement, we can see that they use the signal word of result in or is associated with. There's no opinions involved. It's simply a comparison and contrast of the relationship between two different factors. It's neither negative nor positive, and hence it is neutral. Now, let's look at the second example. 10 billion people will eat a diet richer in animal protein. Is it a positive, a negative, or neutral attitude? The answer is that it is negative. Again, this will be going back to the choice of word or phrases. In the latter half of the second paragraph, we can see that the author used the word serious threat, and this challenge is magnified. So through these two different usage of word, we can feel the anxiety that's brought on by the increase of population and how eating habit has a threat towards food security. And hence, this particular statement is negative. Next, the diversion of edible crops to biofuel increases variability of food prices, which makes it correlated to oil prices, then to supply and demand of food. Again, positive, negative, or neutral? The answer is that it is neutral. We're then going back to the choice of words and how we make inferences. By looking at this particular paragraph, we need to do some Sherlock Holmes style work. In the third paragraph, we can see the word challenge and pose a risk. So yes, the author is still talking about the issues that is correlated to biofuel and edible food, and how when these food are used on biofuel, the prices of the food would not just be a simple supply and demand issue. It becomes a commodity, and how it becomes a variable factor, which then poses a negative effect on low-income groups. However, the author did not post their own opinion. It is simply a series of Sherlock Holmes-style work. It's a series of inferences and logical conclusions, and hence the text is still neutral. Let's look at the next one. A diet rich in plant-based foods and with lower consumption of animal source food is suggested by the EAT Lancet Commission. Again, positive, negative, or neutral? The answer is positive. We can understand that through its word choices. In the same paragraph, we can see that in the concluding sentence, it talked about the health and environmental benefit of a plant-based diet, and hence the statement is positive. Next, measures to ensure food safety and quality do not solve food security problems. Positive, negative, or neutral? The answer should be neutral. We can determine this through the use of transitional word and making inferences. Now you may wonder, why do you say that this is a neutral statement despite the fact in your statement you say a problem cannot be solved? Let's look at paragraph 6. In paragraph 6, it talks about how food security and food safety complements one another, because unsafe food cannot be a part of the supply chain. But sometimes the security measures that are taken to ensure food is safe can result in the waste of food, which means you're decreasing the source of food. We can see the transition of this particular argument through the transition signal, however. And the author used the word safety concern to describe the measures that are taken to ensure foods are safe. Means that the author are not criticizing these safety measures. He's objectively explaining that the process of managing these food and its safety could be influencing the supply of food. And this is why we are able to determine that the attitude of the author is neutral. Now, before the end of today's class, I'm going to give you a little task. Can you think of any feasible way or solutions to ensure we can balance the world's food security and food safety issues? So that is today about our reading and understanding on the concept of sustainability. We talked about the sustainability in energy as well as in food security. We analyzed main text and supporting details as well as determining the attitude of the author through different texts. I hope today's lesson has been valuable to you, and through today's lesson, you've gained a deeper understanding about what is happening around the world. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.